Labour has tabled an amendment to the Queen's speech that calls for an end to austerity and the 1% public sector pay cap. It commends the work of the police and fire service in the recent terrorist attacks and at the Grenfell fire disaster, and calls for the recruitment of more officers and firefighters. Theresa May is likely to see off the Labour challenge with the help of DUP support. Andrew.
Thanks, Joko. Chris, Grayling, by the time of the election, you had presided over 7 years of austerity for the British people. You basically promised another 5. The British people said you're not on. Why were they wrong?
Well, let's be clear, first of all, what you mean by austerity. Austerity means the nation living between its means. When we took office in 2010...
No, within its means, I think, not between it.
Within its means. When we took office in 2010, the UK was borrowing £1 in every 4 that it spent. We have sought to keep bringing that amount down, to stop passing debt to the next generation. At the same time, we've continued to spend more money each year on services like the health service. It's been a difficult balance. There have been some tough decisions on the way. We've had some really great successes in that time. We have the lowest unemployment since the 1970s. We have record levels of employment. The jobs picture, for example, has been beyond all my expectations. When I started as employment minister in 2010, I could never have imagined we make the progress.
Well, here's what austerity is for some people, and that's a 1% public sector pay cap at a time when inflation's almost 3%. That's austerity for our public service workers.
Well, we've had to take some tough decisions. And in the wake of the general election, we're going to have to think through what we do come the next budget. But we haven't shied away from tough decisions in the interests of the country.
It's been tough decisions for other people. 5 million public sector workers have effectively been capped at 1% since 2013.
And what independent estimates say is that enables us to save 200,000 jobs in the public sector. And it is a trade-off because the money doesn't come from nowhere.
But you were then promising more. There's still a public sector pay freeze. So it was endless and relentless. And during the election, public sector workers were saying, yes, we understood to begin with. Everybody had to tighten their belt and make a sacrifice. We did that. We've been in the front line of it. Of course, there's been a huge cut in public sector jobs as well. But no more. We've had enough.
And we've got to listen to the outcome of the election. But you have to remember, of course...
What does that mean, listen? What will that mean in practice?
We're not going to be announcing financial measures today. And it is also important to remember, when you talk about the election, yes, we had a very disappointing result in the election. We still increased our share of the vote. We've still got by far the largest number of people in Parliament. We've won more votes than Tony Blair did in 1997.
Yeah, but you're a minority government. And before the election, you weren't a minority government. So I would hardly file it under S for success. Here's an example of what you could do.
But nor do I actually say, as we're hearing from some on the other side, that we lost the election. Labour won it.
Yeah, but that's semantics. I'm more concerned about what austerity has meant for people on average and below average wages. Would this government now commit for the rest of its life, and we don't know how long that will be, not to cut police numbers any further or not to cut fire service numbers any further?
Well, 2 points on that. First of all, we're protecting the police budgets. And secondly, you will have heard this week the woman who runs the fire service in London saying she doesn't have a problem with the resource that she's got.
OK, but that wasn't what I asked you. What I asked you is, will you commit to not cutting police or fire service numbers now?
Well, we will.
Because you have cut them.
Well, we'll announce spending plans in the autumn statement in the budget, as you'd expect, Andrew, not in the Queen's speech debate.
Yeah, but you've said that you're listening. Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, says, we're not deaf. That's what he said a day or two ago. So if you're not deaf, you need to tell us what you're going to do. And these things don't have to wait for a budget. We've just had 3 terrorist attacks in a row. We've had the worst public disaster in modern times, in recent times, probably since Hillsborough with Grenfell Towers. So why do we have to wait to November to find out? Surely it stands to reason that if you're listening, the police numbers will now be protected and the fire service numbers will now be protected.
Well, the police budget's already being protected.
No, you say budget, I say numbers.
Well, they're the same thing. Policing...
No, they're not. No. You could spend the budget on all sorts of other things. It's numbers.
Chief constables spend the budget, but we are providing chief constables with a budget that is protected, and we have been since 2015.
Are you just on the wrong side now of what is becoming the zeitgeist, which is that people, after such a long period of austerity, some gains have been made, I understand that, but the deficit is still 50 billion, and actually is going to rise this year, we're told, again, that perhaps some tax rises to increase public spending is what the public mood now demands.
Well, of course, we've done two things on tax. The first is for those people within the public sector who have been facing, on lower incomes, have been facing a public sector pay policy of the kind you've described. We've been cutting their taxes by raising the personal allowance year after year after year. But what we've also done is increased the taxation on the wealthiest. They pay a higher share of their income in tax today than was the case when Labour
You haven't increased it. Indeed, you cut the top rate. But the result has been, as more people have moved into that band, you've got more tax revenues. That's called fiscal drag. No, it's not government policy.
No, it is the case that the wealthiest taxpayers are paying a higher share of their income in tax
But not
today.
because you've increased their taxes.
Well, across a whole variety of different ways.
What taxes have you put up for the rich?
We've removed a whole range of tax loopholes over the last 7 years.
Which taxes have you increased on the rich?
They pay a higher share of their income today.
I understand that, but I've explained why that's
the same people. It's not new
But
people
you've said we have put taxes up for the rich. I'm asking you, what taxes have you put up for the rich?
So we've put in place a whole range of measures, removing tax loopholes, removing avoidance schemes that's actually meant people on the wealthiest incomes paying a higher share of their income in tax than they did under Labour.
You've also found £1 billion for the DUP. Although you couldn't get the national insurance changes through, you haven't changed the budget. You seem to have found money to fill that hole as well. Where are you keeping your magic money tree? Where is it hidden?
Well,
is it in the garden at Downing Street, number 11?
Well, what you'll find is that we have much sounder public finance than we had 7 years ago.
You still have the largest deficit of any major economy in Europe. You have the largest budget deficit.
And if you remember, at the last budget, Philip Hammond set in place tight policies, but with some flexibility to allow us to invest in priorities. And I make no apologies, for example, for investing in infrastructure in Northern Ireland, a part of the country that doesn't have the quality infrastructure that other parts of the United Kingdom
But you're basically using our money to prop up your government. It's not your money, it's our money. And we could well have said, as a British people, yep, we should be spending an extra billion. And if we'd done it through the whole country, we could have had a 2% pay rise for NHS staff, which would have been perhaps not enough, but very welcome. 16,600 new social homes, 71 new schools, 1 year of free primary schools. But instead, it's gone to that part of the country that you need to prop you up.
So, yes, we're spending more money on infrastructure in Northern Ireland.
You're not spending
more money on
NHS
infrastructure around the whole of the United Kingdom. We've got new roads, we've got new railway stations, we've got new railway lines.
New roads.
So we are spending money all across the United Kingdom to invest in everyone's future.
All right. In what way was austerity responsible for Grenfell Tower?
I'm not saying that it was.
Some in the Labour Party have, though.
I know, and I've heard what they have said. I think that we have to wait for the inquiry to find out exactly what is responsible and who is responsible, and then decisions need to be taken.
But can you give any reason that it was austerity? I mean, we know it was a terrible tragedy.
It was.
And we know that we need to get to the bottom of it.
Indeed.
But as a general consequence of austerity, what is the link between what you regard as austerity and what happened on that terrible night?
Because it would appear, and I'm accepting that we need to have an inquiry before we know, it would appear that decisions were taken for financial reasons that led to that tower being as unsafe as it was.
But we don't know that. They spent £8 million on the tower. It wasn't as like a lack of money. It's clear that it was, well, not clear yet, quite right, we don't.
Yeah.
It looks like it was spent wrongly.
Indeed.
It looks like wrong materials would have been made. It also looks like it's not unique at all to Grenfell Tower. But that's not because it hadn't money spent on it, it's because it had money spent on it in the wrong way.
Indeed.
That's not austerity.
And why did that happen? And were some of those decisions made?
Well, culpability, clearly, but it's not austerity.
What I'm not going to do is sit here and, make something up that might suit me politically about something that was a dreadful, horrific event.
Have some of your colleagues gone a bit too far on this?
I think some of the language has gone too far.
OK. Let me come on to Europe, and because it's one of our missions here to clarify both the government and Labour's position on Brexit, which I can tell you